Welcome back, everybody, to Quid Prog Quo, the music podcast where I introduce my friends and loved ones to progressive rock music, and they in turn get me to listen to whatever they want. And today we have a recurring guest of Kyle, one of my favorite cousins. Well, I've only got a few handful of them, and they're all my favorites, but Kyle is coming back. He had me originally listen to Tom Minch, and I had him listen to Gentle Giant. So this time around, I figured I'd mix it up a little bit, but I'm still getting him to listen to a classic progressive rock band of King Crimson. So I'm pretty excited to find out what he thinks about that. But before we get into the album proper, I want to thank a few people. First off, Olena Alinsky for the show's graphic, as well as Explosive Ear Candy for the show's graphics. So without further ado, let's dive into this week's episode. Well, thank you so much for coming back onto the podcast. One of the original 5 that I had lined up for this.
Wow.
My good buddy and cousin Kyle.
Yes. Hello. Hi. I'm cousin Kyle. That's my real name.
That is your real name. Yeah. I had you on and we listened to Gentle Giant and Tom Mishk.
Yes.
The first time around. Have you revisited Gentle Giant at all? Or was it like a one-time deal?
I think it was a one-time deal.
That's fair. That's fair.
One of the songs made it onto my playlist, but that playlist has about 2,000 songs on it. So wow. I think I've run into it once or twice. And I was like, oh, what's this? This sounds familiar. Gentle Giant. Oh, right. Yeah, I got this from Michael.
Right on. Yeah, I dove a little bit into Tom's work. I mean, it was easy because there was just one other album. So
yeah.
That was a pretty easy homework assignment for me. But yeah, I always figured that you like cool music, like funky stuff.
Yeah. I like stuff that makes me move a little bit.
That's right. So, and I also figure I can challenge you a little bit. You're not adverse to having your earbuds be challenged every once in a while. So
not at all.
I've got something pretty tasty lined up for you that I'm pretty excited for. So
beautiful.
Yeah.
I actually came up with a short list of 6 albums, and I think I picked the one.
Okay.
But I could change it. I don't know. Do you have anything in particular? What have you gotten recently?
Oh man. So let's see here. My last 3, I've had The Emotional Oranges, I've had Amy Winehouse, and I've had, those are the 2 that like really made a splash for me. Let me just have a quick look, the rundown of my episodes so far. I had Billy Talent. My first time actually diving into Billy Talent's music. I never had a chance to listen to them when they.
It's an oldie but a goodie.
Well, this is the thing, right? Like for me, I always considered them like super new because like as I was developing my taste in music, they were like the next big thing. And I listened to like 1 or 2 of their tracks, and I'm like, nah, it's not for me. I'm going back into like, Pink Floyd and Jethro Tull and whatnot. And I guess I always wrote them off as being a screamo emo band, which they very much are not.
No, they're very much like, I would define them as like, that is the definition of like alternative punk rock or just like Canadian alt rock.
Yeah. Which, because they came out at the same time that say like Panic at the Disco and My Chemical Romance and
interesting. They were actually a little bit earlier than that.
They were a little bit earlier.
The precedents, because I associated them with like Green Day's American Idiot.
Yes,
because when I was growing up, the kind of like the 3 albums that kind of sparked my entire taste in music were like Billy Talent 1, American Idiot, and Linkin Park's Meteora, and those all came up at the same time. And then the next year I moved, and the new school I moved to, there was a guy who was like really into the Killers, Fall Out Boy, Panic at the Disco, and those sorts of more like punk pop, or I would just call them just more punk bands.
But I found myself really digging them because I'm allowing myself to enjoy music regardless of any kind of stigma that's attached to them. Because growing up, I wasn't allowing myself to enjoy music that I knew I liked, like Spice Girls and Backstreet Boys and all those.
Right.
And I've come to recognize if I like them, I'm going to like enjoy them. So life is too short.
The way to go.
Life is too short, and I'm not going to have anybody tell me say no. So that's kind of what I've been grooving to for the past couple of episodes.
Wicked.
So,
well, I don't know. I still feel that part of me still wants to give you some options here. I could just give you one. Do you want me to tell you the 6 albums I picked and then tell you the one I want to give you?
Would it be easier if I give you my album first?
Yeah, sure. You can yours first.
Kind of go for that. So the album that I have in mind is a band that I'm pretty sure you know of. The band is called King Crimson.
do not know them.
Okay.
But I can picture what their logo might look like based on the name.
It's interesting because they have a logo-ish.
It's not in blood, because that's King Crimson. I immediately just picture it dripping blood or something very metal. No,
their first album, called In the Court of the Crimson King, is a staple album. It came out in 1969.
Wow.
It rejuvenized and redefined what rock was. It actually, a lot of people point to this album being the genesis of progressive rock, taking jazzy, impressionistic, avant-garde style of music and applying it to the current zeitgeist of rock and roll. So this was kind of in and around the same time as like Abbey Road, as like Jimi Hendrix, as like Led Zeppelin. But instead of being more blues oriented as Jimmy and Led Zeppelin was, this is much more jazz oriented.
Right on. Okay.
And each album that they put out was completely different. So think of like King Gizzard of today, where like each album is almost a completely different genre. Yes. That's what these guys did. Their first two were very similar, but then they went into this like Renaissance kind of minstrel album, and then a very impressionistic, almost soundscapey album, and then like a straight up jazz album. So like each of their albums in the 70s were very, very different. So I'm giving you,
I love that. Yeah.
I would actually recommend, I think you would have a good time with King Crimson. I'm giving you their final album. This is the album they released in 2001. So the band overall has a pretty lengthy history. In the 70s, they were like the definitive of progressive rock. In the 80s, they basically invented math rock.
Oh, nice.
So
okay. I like that.
They took a hiatus from 1974 or maybe 5 all the way until 1980. And then they reformed themselves in 1980 as this extremely tight math rock thing, which was like nobody had ever heard anything like this before. And they put out 3 albums with this kind of lineup. And then in the 90s, they took a hiatus. And then in the 90s, they reformed as being more of this jazzy, funky outfit. And this is one of my favorite expressions. It's less popular because it's less genre bending and defining, in it being just really good music. So I'm giving you King Crimson's last album, called The Power to Believe.
Power to Believe. I love it.
That's a really big wind up for the album.
No,
proper.
I like it.
But
there's
a lot of
a quote from one musician very similar to this, where I can't remember exactly who it was, and I'm definitely paraphrasing. But it's something along the lines of like, my fans are disappointed because I'm not making more of the same, and that's because I don't make music for them. I make music for myself. Yeah. Right. Yeah, and that's an attitude that I really like.
That's exactly
one of my favorite artists, like right now, who no one's ever heard of, and I'm in his like top 1% on Spotify. Is this guy called Your Neighbors. I was thinking of giving you one of his albums, but I don't think I will.
Okay.
He's done a lot of different singles and stuff, and almost everything he does is like a totally different genre, but it's all very much a mixture of electronic elements with a lot of actual instruments in the background. And I know he brings in a lot of session instruments to do everything, and just sort of locates it himself. I had a list of, most of these albums are from this year, but then there was one older album I was thinking of, and I think because he went through Billy Talent, this might be the way to go. And I'm thinking, have you ever listened to the album Songs for the Deaf by Queens of the Stone Age?
Oh, that brings me back. I have to be perfectly honest. I don't think I'm trying to remember if I've actually sat down and listened to the whole thing, because I have heard a number of their songs. Like that's the one where the song escapes me, but it starts off with bow 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 bow. No one knows.
It might be that album, but it might have been a different album. The thing that makes this album very special, and I think I think you'll really enjoy listening to this actually end to end. Okay. Is that spliced in between the whole album is like a radio show.
Then that's the one. Yes.
I think maybe thinking, No One Knows is probably, that's the most famous song. No One Knows, Go With the Flow. But this is an album that I've actually listened to end to end many times, because in addition to the other albums I mentioned when developing my taste in music, this was another early album because my cousin Jeremy burned it on a CD for me and gave it to me back in the Walkman era.
Oh yes. I still have mine somewhere.
I gave this plenty of listens, and it's a great album. So that's what we're gonna go with.
Okay.
Songs for the Deaf by Queens of the Stone Age.
See, I love this because little known fact, the drummer, I believe, from this album is the same drummer that the Mars Volta had for 2 or 3 of their albums.
I believe that's correct.
So like the man behind the kit is just a powerhouse, and I'm excited because I think I can't say for sure whether or not I've listened to this album in entirety. I know I've listened to their last 2 albums because I got it for a friend on record, like on vinyl, and we were up at the cottage when I gave it to her, and so we listened to them pretty much in successation. So I heard those 2 albums, and I love their approach to rock music. But yeah, I don't think I've ever actually sat down and listened to Songs for the Deaf in its entirety. So I think you made a really good choice. I'm pretty excited for this.
I think so too. I'm happy with it as well. I'll say too, like of all the bands I've seen live, and I have not seen as many bands as you have. You're more the I've been to a lot more concerts, I think, actually, since I moved here, but not recently, of course.
Right.
But of all the bands I've ever seen, Queens of the Stone Age, I cannot believe how long they can play for. They played for like 3 hours straight with like a 10-minute break, and the whole time just full power, full energy.
Oh yeah.
Like I don't understand how the guy can do that. How could you do that like every day, or even for a couple days in a row? Like, how do you not lose your voice? How do you not? And they're not young anymore either.
No. Like they were. I remember when I was in grade 6. So this is going back like maybe 15 years ago. So like that was when they were putting out those albums, and they're still putting out albums today and touring like they were. So
definitely. No, I was also thinking about giving you their new album, but I think the old one's better.
Yeah, and I believe I've already heard the new album. So
Villains. That's a good one as well.
I am Villains, and the one that they put out before, was it I can picture it.
Yeah, that's a song on It's Like Clockwork.
Yes, because
Sitting by the Ocean. I know all the names of the songs on it, but I don't know the album's name itself,
Yeah, because I know I got Villains, because is there a 10-minute track on that one?
Something like that. I think it was like a 9-minute one.
Yeah, that I got really excited for, because whenever I see a song that's over 8 minutes, I'm like, ooh, now we're talking. So
is it? Head Like a Pumpkin, maybe? Is that
Head Like a Pumpkin? Maybe. I don't
something
know.
like that.
Something around those lines.
Something like that. I remember that was my cousin Jeremy, who, again, I went to the show with him, and he's the one who gave me the album. That was his favorite song off that album as well.
Oh, okay. Right on. Yeah. Right on.
Or my first listen to, I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. He's like, no, that's the one. Go back, listen to that song. It's the best. All right. He was right. Okay, he was right.
Okay.
It held up really well.
I'll take it. Right on. All right. Well, I'm going to spend some time with Queens of the Stone Age. You have some fun with your first introduction to King Crimson. I'm almost shocked that you haven't heard of them before. So
that story of my life, man. How you must have heard of this. I promise you I have not.
I assure you I have not.
Yeah, I assure you. If I did, I would know. And I assure you I have not.
That's funny.
Yep. I choose the rock I live under. And so I love it here. It's great.
That's great. That's great.
All right. Catch you on the flip side, then.
All right. We'll see you soon.
Sounds good. Cheers.
And with that, Kyle and I go into our own music silos. I get to listen to Queens of the Stone Age, and he gets to listen to King Crimson. Pretty excited about what he has to say about King Crimson. And I had a blast with Queens of the Stone Age. I hadn't actually sat down and listened to this. As I was listening to it, I realized I hadn't actually listened to it. So pretty excited to talk about it and some of the highs and lows off of that album. But before I do, I want to thank a few people. I want to thank Axel. He's a patron of mine. He donated way back when, so I wanted to give a shout out to Axel, as well as Mark Foy, another long-term supporter of mine. I wanted to thank those 2 individuals. And if you want to be cool like Mark and Axel, head on over to my Patreon. It's Patreon/Notes Reviews. That's where you can get behind the scenes scoops sometimes for videos that I put out on my Notes Reviews. You get shout outs on this, as well as all of my YouTube videos for Notes Reviews. Depending on what you donate, you can either have me listen to an album on a live stream, have me review an album. There's lots of great stuff there. Go and check it out at Patreon/Notes Reviews. And if you aren't already subscribed to this on the YouTubes, if you're watching this on YouTube at Quid Prog Quo, go and, sign up. subscribe, give this video a like, comment down below what you're liking about it. Hoping to get a little bit more traction on this. And if you didn't know already, this is a podcast. So please rate, subscribe, comment, share it with friends, spread the word out. We're coming on to, I think, like 35 episodes, 36, 37. So there's a lot here to discover. And yeah, I think that's all I've got for right now. So let's dive back into this week's episode, find out what Kyle thought about King Crimson and what I thought about Queens of the Stone Age. Let's dive back in. Right on, right on.
Yeah.
So what did you think about King Crimson, your first endeavor in them?
I liked it. It was
good.
a little bit all over the place, but I think overall, definitely like positive feeling towards the album. Yeah, I quite enjoyed it. I had some extra time, so I also went and side note, we'll talk about the album, but I went and listened to their number one track, which is a 21st Century Schizoid Man.
That's the one. Yep.
Yeah. What initially hit me is I'm like, wait a second, I recognize that phrase. Yeah. Where do I recognize? Do you know where I know it from? I'm actually gonna guess you don't.
Probably from this album. Like this is where it kind of became famous. But where did you know this from?
You're wrong. It didn't become famous there. It became famous because Kanye sampled it in the song Power, which has 600 million listens on Spotify right now. It just uses that 21st century schizo man. Boom, 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 boom.
Yes. I am very aware. I am very aware of that. But are you saying that that's how
that
this
phrase,
song
just that
became,
phrase?
That phrase.
No, that's not how
it became famous. Because
anyone who listens to the song is gonna be like, well, how do I know this? Why have I heard this before? And it's because Kanye used it.
Right.
Yeah, I had to go to the Wikipedia page to figure that out because it was driving me crazy.
Right. I was going to say that's a little bit of a blanket statement because I don't know if everybody knows Kanye. Like
only 600 million people. Yeah,
I've never heard the song before.
Don't worry. That was me once upon a time too, Michael. But
the only way that I knew that song existed was in Power Rangers. The movie, the latest Power Rangers movie, they actually had that song in the and I'm like, they're playing King Crimson, and my friend's like, I don't think that's King Crimson. I'm like, no, that's King Crimson. And
right.
Yeah, that's how I found out about it.
Right on.
But yeah, so yeah, it's interesting. Let's do a little bit of a deep dive.
Side note, yeah. Anyways, back on topic.
I will say, before we go back onto the topic, the 21st Century Schizoid Man is my least favorite. Well, I shouldn't say least favorite. One of my least favorite tracks from that debut album.
Wow.
Because all the other tracks off of that album are much more subdued. They're a lot more impressionistic. Whereas this one is much more in your face. And I remember when I was first listening to it, I didn't enjoy that much in your face music. I liked a lot more of the ethereal, very, I keep using impressionistic, but like that kind of a flavor.
I think I know what you mean by that.
Yeah.
This is something where like, I actually say, if you had said before I listened to this album, I wouldn't have known what you meant, because I think that's the type of music I generally avoid. Right. But some of the tracks here, you're like, oh yes, very impressionistic. I'm like, yes. I see that.
Yeah. It's almost, it's like, a very pastel and like abstract painting, right? Where I always say the more you look at it, the more you get out of it. But like upon first looking at it, you're like, well, what's all this? It's not music, it's sound, right? And that's
I actually, the note I took for that is like, this isn't music, this is art.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, there's a couple of those.
Yeah. All right. Cool. Well, let's dive in properly to this album.
Yeah. Do you want me to go through song by song here? I've got oodles of notes.
Yeah, however you want to.
Yeah, sure. So there's an intro track. There's a quote in there. I remember liking the quote. I don't remember what it was. We can move on though. Just an intro.
Yeah.
The first major song, Level V.
Yeah.
All instrumental. The first thing I noticed, it's like a 7/8 song, so that's kind of proggy, using a strange time, or not even that strange time signature. But the other thing that I noticed immediately was that they're using a lot of programmed drums.
Yes.
Which for like in the 2003 timeframe, I think it's interesting. Like I found a couple bands kind of later 2000s that were doing that, and they tend to be more in the metalcore genre.
Yeah.
And that was just because they're playing so fast, it makes sense to program the drums, but it does have a very unique sound. And so it's interesting, they're kind of doing that before it was cool. And so in my head, I'm like, did they inspire that? And I think the answer might be no. I think it was just kind of, they were just doing this experiment before I think it became a mainstream thing. So they were just ahead of the curve. Maybe it was influential. I'm just guessing. I don't know.
That is something that King Crimson is very known for doing, is like experimenting well before it became popular. And so where a lot of these, and it's really hard to say, chicken and egg kind of a thing. But I do know one of the main reasons why they went into more of a synthetic drum sequence was their main drummer that they had in the 70s and 80s and a little bit at the beginning of the 90s was, his name was Bill Bruford, and he was able to just do a lot of these styles of drumming, but with his age, he just couldn't keep up anymore. But they still wanted to have that same essence on here. And they found that by playing with these beats, they could create a lot of really interesting sounds with it.
Totally. Yeah, because they do a mixture. What's the other thing I noticed here is that there's like a mixture between like what you can tell are very artificial sounds that they'll introduce that are clearly like synth drum sounds, but then they'll put in like what is supposed to sound like real drums. And I know I found myself a question a lot through the album. Okay, is this real drums or is this synth? And there's a lot of songs where it's not obvious, but this first song, it was pretty obvious that it was mostly, if not entirely, programmed. And the other thing they had that was going on that's very cool is they had kind of like this dueling guitar thing going on.
That was
like
so
that.
This track, level V, or it's level 5, is technically the fifth sequence, the fifth track of this bigger track that they've been doing since the 70s called Lark's Tongue and Aspic. And where all the other tracks that came before is like Lark's Tongue and Aspic part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. This one is kind of tangentially a part of it while also not being a part of it. So that's
like
why
epilogue, maybe
it is. Yeah, because the album that came out before this, which was The Construction of Light, ended with Lark's Tongue and Aspic part 4. So this one starts off with level 5.
Gotcha.
Now, I do also know in terms of the rhythm section and the drums, Bill Bruford kind of orchestrated one of the first synth drum set in the 80s, where he was able to program the different pedals for different sounds. And this was something that a lot of different prog bands were doing in the 70s, but he did a full drum set. So
I've got one right there, actually.
Right, yeah. But this was done in like the 80s. And so this style
it's crazy.
of creating drums, even though it's still synth and artificial, the actual playing is still very traditional.
Yes.
So it's kind of like this marriage, and this was something that they always love to do, is this marriage between the traditional and the cutting edge.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I found that the thing though that what I'm listening to particularly when I'm trying to figure out if it's programmed or not is not just that, because even with because I have basically it is the drum synthesizer right beside me here, and even with that, the thing that makes it sound real is not the synth part, it's the human aspect, right? Because a human, really, you can, like, the best drummer in the world can hit the drum with the same amount of sound. It'll sound pretty similar, but air flows, so it's always going to sound a little bit different, right? Versus with a synth, they often will find like, this is the perfect tone we want, but then sometimes people they'll take the perfect tone, they're like, let's just move it over a little bit in production. And it also very, I guess I wrote disgusting tone on the guitar.
That's something that's very prominent in these guys.
I like that a lot. It's also a very produced song I wrote, but not in a bad way. Like there was an interesting part I remember too, where they were like, it felt like they were moving the guitar like around in space as it was playing. I thought that was pretty neat. That was that first song though.
I love that track. It's a great way to open the album off, and it's still one of my favorite tracks of theirs. So,
definitely. No, I liked it a lot. Very cool song. The next one, Eyes Wide Open. I wasn't sure if there were going to be new vocals, so it opens with vocals. So, okay, I got you. There's something very different sound than the first one here too. Again, there's like programmed drums, but this time they're kind of mixed between that and what sounds like a real drum kit. Very clean tone. I personally found this song to be very boring. I went back and gave it a little bit of a listen to see if there was any build up, and I found there was a little bit, but it's almost like it builds, like if you were to take the maximum build and the minimum build, there's like a very small difference.
It's a step. Yeah, it's just a step.
Yeah, just a step.
Yeah.
So
that's
good
fair.
song, but not exactly exciting.
Yeah, I find like, and this is something that we'll probably be talking about throughout the song. I do find that there's a little bit of a quality waiver between some of these tracks. Like you can tell those tracks that they were meticulous over, especially with that first track of like in the studio, pre-planning every single note, and then others that are more like jamming sessions and much more improvisation. Yeah, I can't speak.
There you go.
Nailed it. Yeah, I got it in one. Because that was something that was really big that they did in the 70s, was like these jam sessions that they would essentially just play a set, and between songs they would just like jam a little bit and then take the best parts of those jam sessions and then put them on an album. It's like, there's our next album. So
very cool.
But that in and of themselves would be wavering of quality. So I do feel like Eyes Wide Open kind of goes back to that original just jam sessions, and it's fine, but
it doesn't really. I would disagree a bit though, just in terms of like it's very clearly like it had vocals and it was written, right? So it didn't really have that jammy. To me, it seemed like something that was intentionally written, but I agree with you, it doesn't fit in with the rest of the album. It's the only song that stood out to me is not fitting in.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I can see that though. Yeah, it's a little bit more. I'm trying to think of the word. Maybe accessible would be the right word. Like more of a traditional track.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It had kind of maybe a bit of a dad rock vibe to it.
That's fair. That's
fair. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. What did you think about Electric?
Let me think about it. This is an interesting song. It's very long. Notes on it I had. Programmed drums that sound like it was like a synth to the bass.
Yep.
They did this cool sort of like one guitar per ear, again, like the dueling guitars, but this time explicitly, like I remember being like, is it? Oh, yeah, no, it's completely just one in each ear, like that sort of thing. That was pretty cool. But I found they did just the song made me sad until the end. I liked the end of it. I liked the way it ended. I think the last 2 minutes or so, but the middle of it made me sad. I don't know why. And maybe to summarize it, I guess it's one of those things where like this is art, but this art makes me feel bad. So it's good art.
It's good,
but it's not for me. You know?
Right. Well, art is anything. Art is a piece that makes you feel right. So it's if you want to feel good, it's art. If you want to feel bad, it's art. I always found, and this is just my own personal preference, I always found that Level 5 and Electric were almost interchangeable to me. Just because I believe they're both instrumental pieces. They both have,
they are.
They're known as binaural beats, where they go between the hemispheres, and it's the two, binaural being like your brains, right? And it's interesting.
That word around, but I didn't know exactly what it meant, but that makes sense.
Yeah. So this makes sense because when this album came out, they were actually touring with Tool. With Tool's album Lateralis, because Lateralis also has a lot of binaural beats as well. So that's one of the concerts that I wish I was able to see, but like in 2001, 2002, I was 13 or 14 years old.
Right.
So wasn't quite ready.
Mom's not taking you to Tool.
I think my dad would. My dad he would.
Yeah.
But I don't see my mom coming to that. Anyway, I knew I had to talk about that somewhere, and I think Electric is the perfect spot for those syncopated binaural beats going on there.
No, I see what you're saying. It is similar to Level 5, but personally I personally enjoyed Level 5 much more.
I would agree. I like Level 5 more.
But I think that's because Electric is supposed to make you feel bad.
A little bit,
or something. Maybe not bad. Sad might be the better word.
Maybe sad. I think sad. Yeah.
The next we got Facts of Life intro, which again, just another intro. As soon as Facts of Life kicks in, I don't understand why this is the intro. This has nothing to do with it. It doesn't sound anything like it. I think it was just filler, like jam content they just slapped in there. But I really like Facts of Life. This, I think, was one of my favorite songs off the album. I wasn't sure about it until the chorus came in, and it slaps. It's got that like big metal sound,
Mm-hmm.
almost like Avenged Sevenfold vibes, but without the double kick, like in a good way. So I guess
I
like
can feel that. Yeah, I can feel
halftime
that.
Avenged Sevenfold, but like
Yeah.
that very big metal.
Mm-hmm.
And like I really like there's a lot of things they do with like there's this rim shot and guitar pattern where they'd match up. It was like da na 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 da na 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 na. I like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and they had like one lyric I actually wrote down because I liked it so much. It's like nobody knows what happens when you die. Believe what you want. It doesn't matter if you're right. That is a fact of life. And then it goes into the chorus, and I love that. So overall, great song. Big fan.
Yeah. I actually gave you this album pretty much specifically for that track because I knew that this would have been that funky, more metally track that I think you could really sink your teeth into.
Big fan.
Yeah.
Big fan. Yeah. Then we get into the real power of the first, I guess, major power to believe. Because we had one already, but it was just the intro. Yeah. So this is where things get really weird. This is the one that really starts to feel like art.
Yeah.
So there's like the synth organ intro where they have like dueling ride cymbals now. So the binaural beats, but they're using a ride cymbal to do that. That's kind of cool. And they start bringing in like some bells and some world percussion. I think I heard like pan drums and like chimes and stuff like that. And there's some like heavy reverb, very abstract vocals. Overall, it feels very abstract is the word I would use. You might say impressionist. I would say abstract.
Yeah.
It ends with a fuzzy guitar riff and some real sounding drums. As the ride cymbal still alternating. I think like overall, I didn't understand why most of the song existed. I really liked the last bit of it where they kind of gets to more what I would call like normal standard music that I know. But that's art, and in this case, that art didn't really make me feel much. It made me feel confused. What can you do?
No, that's fair. See, this is a technique that I love when artists use, and I haven't seen another name for it, so I had to come up with my own, but it's like chaotic resolution, where the first bit is just chaos. They're just throwing things at the wall. It could be either very intense or very quiet, and then it slowly kind of resolves itself into this actualization. So it's almost like you're trying to think of an answer, and all these different things are coming to your mind until you finally discover the actual answer. So that's where it's like this chaotic resolution.
I see what you're saying.
I find a lot of progressive rock does this, and I know King Crimson does this quite a bit. I find they don't resolve it 100%. Half the time I think they just kind of like leave it off and it kind of wanders away. I'm like, no, you need to resolve it into something.
It definitely feels like there's some resolution, but I often don't feel like the chaos and the resolution have anything to do with one another. They seem like two separate pieces almost.
Right.
And I think all of the sort of power to believe or this and the third power to believe song are very similar in that way.
Yeah, I feel that. We're coming up to my favorite track off this album. I know yours
Dangerous
was
Curves.
I love this track.
I love the name.
This track.
When I think Dangerous Curves, I think like Kate Upton or something. So I'm excited to see what this is.
Right.
It's interesting opening. I wrote synth violins with industrial sounds. Yeah, and like I say, industrial sounds. It kind of reminds me of like 9 Inch Nails in some.
I was
going
to say like 9 Inch Nails, or even.
It almost sounds like they're hitting a garbage can. There's like that kind of metal, like concrete reverb happening.
Yeah,
and then it's kind of playing like the same guitar. Almost, it sounds like it's a robot playing like the same little riff through the whole. It sounds like 1 or 2 notes almost too, but it's very effective. And then it builds into something very interesting. It's almost like there's multiple basses, and they kind of introduce some of that like different percussion. It sounds like going around, and then at 4 minutes on the dot, it just drops a lot of that like non-core instrument, and then it just becomes the drums are the focus, and they're building up, and it's very cool. And then it has a very epic like climax, and then a long fade out, and I thought it was very cool.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite tracks off of the album, and I love how it's basically just the same note sequence played over and over and over again that just continuously builds like a snowball rolling down a hill that then causes an avalanche. The other thing that I love about this is how it ends on such an ugly crescendoed note.
That note at the end is disgusting.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's so gnarly, and you're just like,
Yeah, I liked it. I think I laughed when that happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it comes into my other favorite track off of the album.
Yes. I love this song as well. Happy with what you have to be happy with.
Yeah.
It starts just major distortion. The distortion is back.
Yeah.
It's a big change from Dangerous Curve. The long fade out, just immediately all the guitar,
and then
all the drums, all the bass.
Yeah.
And the very raw vocals, like almost intentionally. It seems like, I don't know, they're probably not using a bad microphone, but it's like one of those good microphones that intentionally kind of sounds bad, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
That's
very
the whole thing.
Raw. Very, very
but then
raw.
The lyrics are meta. Which caught me by surprise. Made me laugh again. Like, we're gonna need a chorus. Singing about writing the chorus in the chorus instead of actually having a chorus. And I thought that was great. And I really like that song. Big fan of that. Yeah.
My one of my best friends, this is her only song from King Crimson that she'll listen to. And so she loves this track, but I love the groove, I love the music, and much like yourself, I love the meta lyrics, because I mean, it starts off with, I guess we'll need some words to sing into the microphone, you know, and the whole thing is basically just what he's doing. He's like, I guess we're gonna need a chorus, and I'm gonna sing it until I'm blue in the face.
And
cool. That's the whole track, and then the actual chorus is just happy to be with what you have to be happy with. And it's this not sequence of words playing around with the not sequence of music. And I love how those two are very interchangeable in that.
Totally.
This is one of my favorites.
The most normal song on the album.
Yes,
in my opinion.
I think this one and Eyes Wide Open are the two more normal tracks off of here, but I do feel like this one fits the bill much more than the other one, for sure.
This one fits the album for sure, because it just catch you by surprise, but there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in it too. For sure. I love that track. And then the album ends with the Power to Believe 3 and 4. Power to Believe 3, very much like Power to Believe 2, starts out with a very abstract sort of 2 minutes of intro. I didn't even write anything about the intro. I didn't find it particularly memorable. I was just kind of like, I don't know what's going on here. And then of course, halfway through, it drops into what I like it's like a half-time, maybe even quarter-time metal groove. Like, if you know what that, it's like very slow, like bum, bum. I don't remember exactly what it is. I just remember it was very, I was like, oh wow, that's a lot.
It's like
slower, like and it's big. It slaps. It comes in with a groove, like very big, but then very slow. Lots of space. Clean metal guitar, but heavily distorted bass. And then as the end is approaching, they speed up the time signature, and then they slow it down until they kind of fade out. They don't slow it all the way down though. But it's art. I kind of did like the intro. Was kind of interesting, but like, it's art. This is it's not something I would choose to listen to. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. Yes. I know.
But if it was a painting, I would hang it up, and maybe I'd put it on a wall if it was a painting. But
well, there's a quote, and I can't remember who said it, but it was, art is what we use to decorate space, and music is what we use to decorate time.
I like that a lot.
I was just like,
wow. I should get that painted and hung on my wall.
You should, in Comic Sans.
Beautiful.
And so like, I always like, that's one of my favorite quotes, and I wish I could track down who said it. It's just a Google search away. But like, this album and those like Power to Believe suites are very much like that kind of abstract art that I would like hang on the wall and just stare at for hours.
Totally. I want to say Power to Believe 4. I was the only one of those 4 that I liked. I actually thought it was a really nice ending to the album. It's kind of got that ambient violin opening, but it reminded me of oftentimes the sort of music they will play at the start of a film. Right, as they sort of like the camera pans over the grass landscape. You have that sort of abstract. You can't even tell it's violin often. But that's kind of what it is, with probably some wiggling of a knob in production. Right. And I think there might have been like some words spoken during that, but I would say it wouldn't stand up by itself, but as an outro to the album, I thought it fit, and I really liked it.
That's great. And I'm glad that you enjoyed it. How was the album? Like, we talked about the individual songs. How did you enjoy the album as a whole?
I'm not usually someone who listens to albums as a whole, but as a whole, I did like it. I definitely liked it. Yeah.
Yeah, because this is something that I'm trying to ask my guests on here is your usual way of listening to music, because it changes based on their person. Like I'm a very album guy. Like I listen to an album in its entirety because like it's more of like a holistic listen to me, like how the songs interact with each other on the album overall. But I think you're more of like a playlist guy, right?
Yeah, it depends. Like anytime if an artist I like and know about puts out an album, I've started making myself, I'll listen to the whole album, but then often I'll do that 1, 2, 3 times, but usually after the second time I'm like, okay, yes, these are the songs that I'm going to continue listening to.
Right. Yeah. And then do you construct your own playlists, or do you?
I never use the Spotify playlists. I've always been a big user of the like button, so I have like 2,000 something liked songs that I will play. But I've been making a point of doing sort of these rotating playlists that are like time sectioned, and I'm doing some themed one as well now. So I've got like an instrumental one, a jazz themed, anything that's kind of groovy, funky. I got a big playlist for that.
Right.
But then it's also just like, here are kind of the things that I found in these time periods, and I can go back, listen to playlists. Like, oh, I remember where I was when I was with this. Yeah, it's interesting to do that. I like it.
Yeah, and because I was the very same way, but less with playlists and more of like mixed CDs. Showing my age a little bit, because I still have like 2 binders full of these mix albums that I would do, and it would either be theme based or, much like yourself, the tracks that I was most listening to at a particular time. And going back and listening to those, it brought me right back to those times when I created them. It also was like really strange on some of the themes that I had with these. Like there was one that was songs about pirates. So all the songs, it was all songs about pirates. So yeah, it was fun. But no, that's great. And I'm glad that you enjoyed this one. Are you saving any of these tracks to any of those playlists?
Oh yeah. I think there were at least 3. I think I saved happy to have to be happy with, facts of life, and level 5.
Okay,
those are all going on. I liked all of them, and
yeah, and I think we're in agreement, because those are my 3 favorite tracks from this album, outside of Dangerous Curves. Dangerous Curves is still my favorite. So
yes, and I will take a note. Like I'm definitely going to follow up with this artist more, because I have a feeling I'm going to like a lot more of their stuff.
Oh, absolutely. As I mentioned, all their stuff from the 70s, each album is very, very different. The 3 albums that they put out in the 80s and the 3 albums that they put out in the 90s and 2000s kind of have the same sound to them, but each iteration is very, very different. So, and I think you'll get a kick out of them. I
have a feeling I will. Yeah, a lot of that. I've been a big fan of sort of a lot more. Like my taste in music as I've gotten older has slowed down a lot. So I still like a lot of proggy and math stuff, but it's moved from like the metal chords, like more what I'd call technical, a better use of space, let's say, as opposed to just the art of filling space with as much as humanly possible.
Right. And I think you'll actually get a kick out of these guys, because essentially they're just slowed down like mathcore. Perfect. So that's really fitting the bill for that. And so switching gears, you had me listen to my first time through. I almost said The Offspring, but
Queens of the Stone Age. Songs for the Deaf.
Songs for the Deaf.
It is for you, as they say.
I really found myself enjoying this because I had heard a few of these tracks previously. Obviously Go With the Flow and No One Knows I kind of already heard before, but like overall I was surprised at how heavy this album was, especially only knowing the 2 tracks, which really are more of their 2 shorter or softer tracks in comparison.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, much like you, I have notes on here. They're not quite as in depth, but I did also enjoy the through line of essentially this guy taking a drive and changing the knobs on the dial there and finding out what's being played on the radio. Really, really enjoyed that, because it felt like a late night country drive where you're going through different townships and realizing, even though you're in a different area of the country, they're still playing the same songs. So I still really, really enjoyed that aspect to it.
Yeah, there's a lot of little jokes in there too, and it does a very interesting thing, sort of like the cohesion of the album.
And I love a good through line for an album. It's why I love concept albums. And so yeah, obviously the first track, the real song for the deaf, just like an intro track. The first, you think I ain't worth a dollar. It was a good heavy track, and again, it caught me off guard a little bit. I knew Queens of the Stone Age were a heavy band, but I forgot just how heavy they were. This one, yeah, it hit really, really hard. I think it's a great way to introduce the album. And I also love, for a lot of these tracks, the transitions between the tracks. They were very, I would use the word smooth transitions. Like just between that song and No One Knows, it almost feels like they could be the same track, just with a different transition within it. And No One Knows, still one of my favorite tracks of this time period. I love the drumming styles. I love the groove and bass. The bass work on this album really surprised me. I also loved the mastery of the guitar works, because it's really easy. Well, it's not really easy, but it's one thing to perfect like the chugging style of guitar work, the very metal side of guitar works, but then to go and transition from that into more of like a classical guitar works and like very noodly guitar works, that's a little bit harder to do. So I really appreciate that difference of things there.
Right on.
So No One Knows, I loved. I made some notes on a few tracks. The main ones were the Song for the Dead. I loved the guitar work. I loved the heavy hittingness. And I also love how the song progressed. I loved the outro and how it never really stopped. Because I love a track that does that. I love a track that keeps you on your toes. Like you think it's done, and then it keeps going. And then they stop, and you're like, okay, now it's done. But then they keep going again. So I really enjoyed that part. And I love how it kind of lends itself to the theme of this track, which is Songs for the Dead, and that life is what you experience, but death is the ever-presence-ness. So even when that's what's always happening and always occurring. So I really enjoyed that concept that this track has multiple endings on it.
Yeah, that's a good one. I was actually said just to comment myself as well. You think I ain't worth a dollar, but I feel like a millionaire. For me, that's like a track that I thought was worth saving on this album. Same with No One Knows, and also same with Song for the Dead. I just played it to quickly spark my memory, and I was like, oh yes, they make a great use of stopping in this song too, because they're like, bow, bow, but they just like pause and they go back into it.
Yeah, I really, really like that. I also love The Sky Is Fallen. The thing that I loved about Sky Is Falling, and I love when bands do this, is there's a dichotomy going on. There's contrasts. So I love that the guitars are very, very heavy, very metal, but the vocals are extremely soothing. It's almost like a lullaby. So you have these harsh guitars paired with this heavenly, like angelic, almost like a whisper singing styles. And I love when that happens. I love when it's vice versa, where the vocals are very harsh, very gnarly, but then the song that's around it is very soft and very soothing. And it is going into the, I guess, thesis of The Sky Is Falling, of like this catastrophe, but there's still beauty to be found in storms. So really, really enjoyed that.
Definitely. If you think about it too, the song itself almost sounds like a storm, right? You have the voice is the wind, and then the would be the guitars would almost be the effect of the wind, like causing branches to crackle. And
Yeah,
It's very
there's
cool.
a saying when there's a massive windstorm, it's not how fast the wind is blowing, it's what the wind is blowing that's going to do
Ah.
you in, right? So
Yeah, I
yeah,
like
the
that.
wind itself, it doesn't really pose much of a threat. It's when you
Mhm.
get smashed by a Buick, that's when the real threat happens.
Oh
So
yeah, that's
yeah.
funny.
Um honestly, I'm going to say this, I wasn't a big fan of Six Shooter.
Yeah, I wouldn't even know what that song is.
Yeah, it
Not
was a
memorable.
here and done. Wasn't a big fan of that, but I do love the Hanging Tree.
Mm.
Again, it had these sounds in it that was haunting. That was the word that I kept using with this.
Mm.
One of the visuals that I always find very off-putting is a tree with a hanging body in it, like a noose.
Mm.
For
Yeah.
some reason, that's always one of the most off-putting visuals, and
Mhm.
this track was almost a audio representation of that.
Right on.
And it was
Wow, that's
very,
effective art then.
yeah, it is very effective art. Like it was very
Yeah.
subtle too. Like it's only when you were like closing your eyes and paying attention to the music that you're like, there's a lot going on in the background that's
Mhm.
almost hidden by a lot of these more soothing sounds. um yeah.
Very cool.
Let's see here. Ooh, I also loved Go With The Flow, as I mentioned before, and I didn't realize there's a vocal section that's very similar to the track Who's There from Smash Mouth.
Mm.
um it's the same sequence of vocals that are going on it, and it's um yeah, it's something like Who's There. It's the same
The
sequence of
same sort of.
notes.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
gotcha.
same kind of bounciness,
Hmm.
that I love, but I also love the drive that's on this one. And same with God Is in the Radio. And
Yes,
those
that's a good
those
one.
two tracks, one of the things I love is the single repetitive piano note that both of these tracks use.
Hmm.
It's in the background, and it's just this like Go With The Flow is very like ding 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 ding
Right.
ding, and same with God Is in the Radio. It's a little slower, it's a little softer, but it's still that
Yeah.
ding
Ding,
ding ding
ding,
ding ding ding.
ding.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
I love how these two tracks have that singular repetitive note sequence on the piano that grounds the track. It's almost
Hmm.
like tethering this track to the ground, and you're just basically going in a loop trying to get away
That's
from
good,
it.
and they do it without that. That can some songs that will drive me crazy because they'll pick like the one piano note, and it
Mhm.
just like it stands out like a sore thumb. But in these two, it really fits.
Yeah,
I
and
find at
part
least.
of the reason for that is it's a technique that's used in classical music a lot,
Mm.
where it's used in arpeggios and syncopations, where the
Mm.
same note will change in your brain based on the notes that are found around it.
Oh,
It's kind of
fascinating.
like when you do fugues in music, where it's just like right.
Right.
It's that same note that's at the top that starts to differ when you get to the notes that are around it.
Mhm.
So it'll be that same note that keeps the rhythm, and then you have all these kind of harmonies that are playing around it. So even though it's the single note, it's different when you look at it through different lenses. And both of those tracks I love because of that. Yeah.
Right on. Me
Um,
too. Also a big fan of both of those.
I
Yeah.
also love the little nod to the Satanisms in God Is in the Radio, with the backward sounds and the backward
Mm.
vocals.
Mhm.
I don't know if you remember, but there was a lot
I
of,
remember hearing of that. There's certain albums you would
yeah,
turn the record and play it
if you play it
backwards, and
backwards, it's yeah,
oh,
it's
they're
like
summoning the
there's
devil.
summoning the devil, it's devil
Ugh.
worshiping. So
It's
I
gonna
love,
corrupt
it's
your
gonna corrupt the
kids.
Ruth. Yeah, so I love when a band kind of plays into that a little bit, especially with a
Mhm.
track called God Is in the Radio.
Really
um
fits the theme of the album
it
too,
does, yeah,
as a
it really
whole. Yeah.
does. And then the last one that I have is Another Love Song. I love that track. I love the smooth, easy guitars on this. I
Mhm.
love how it's contrasted by some of the songs that are around it, which are very chugging guitars, much more metal guitars. I love that this is a little bit more of a smooth guitar outlook on it. And I love, with a lot of these tracks, I love the drive of it. And I can find myself really getting swept away from this. And I also love that this album has one of those like fake endings, with Songs for the Dead having like a good 30 seconds of silence before coming back and having a little bit more sound to it, and then having like the secret song of Mosquito Song. That was a big thing back in the late 90s, early 2000s, where you would have about like a minute, 2 minutes worth of silence, or sometimes on CD players, there would be like this countdown to the next album within the track listing. So it would finish a track, but then you would start counting down from like 2 minutes or 30 seconds or whatnot for the next. So it was like this track between tracks. So yeah, anyway, really found myself digging this album. I don't know if I would sit down and listen to this album in its entirety again. Like there are enough here that if I had on like a tape or a record, I would sit down and listen to it. But I still love a lot of those individual tracks. But yeah, still had a great time with it.
Yeah, totally. I know what you mean. It's also just, there's just a lot of songs.
There are a lot of songs.
You know, that's why did I have such detailed notes? Because there were not that many songs. You know, I had maybe like, what was it, like there's 9 tracks, really only 7, 2 intros. You know, this is more than twice that. Yeah, I hear you. And like you can also take, you know, I think like I like about half the songs of this album. And I can take those and just put those on a playlist, and it still is the same vibe. You know, you're not getting the whole radio play, but there's enough radio play in between that too.
Yeah,
I feel like this would be a good song for like, would it be a long drive? I just drive somewhere by myself.
Yes,
because I don't know if it's not like a good road trip album, but if you just drive somewhere by yourself, this would be a good accompaniment, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. Like this, like I think that's what this was made for, like those late night drives in the countryside. I think this is like that perfect soundtrack for that. And yeah, I'd have no problem putting this on if I had like an hour's worth of drive ahead of me. Like that was something that I was doing growing up. Like I would just do a day trip to Toronto growing up in Barrie, and that's about just over an hour. So this would have fit the bill perfectly. Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool.
Right on. Well, thank you for introducing me to that. And
anytime. It's a classic.
It's a classic. And I see why it's a classic. There's a lot of albums that I slept on when I was, you know, in those. And I'm like, I'll get to it eventually and whatever.
Right.
But yeah, I can definitely see why this was a classic. So
awesome. I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to promote? Anything you want to let the listeners know of?
Not right now. No, I'm not really a public figure by any means. So, you know, maybe one day.
Maybe one day. And then the listeners can be like, I knew him when.
Yeah. Beautiful. No, that's about it. This is the most public thing I really do.
All right.
Right now. Maybe one day.
One day. Well, thanks for coming on again. And thank you listeners and viewers for watching. Be sure to do all the likes, shares, subscribes, all that thing. I'm on social media. It's a fun time ish. And yeah, just keep sharing music and have fun out there.
Yeah, right on. That's the message. Take away. Share music, share the love.
Music. Share love.
Be happy.
I think those are the great 3 things. Share love, share music, be happy.
Yeah. It's all you need. The whole life.
I think we'll just end there. That's great.
Perfect. Right on.